For those that bought Netflix because of Squid Game, it looks like you really do love risking it all for the glory. For those that bought Netflix because Love is Blind, well, so are you, buying the stock at $400. And for those who bought Netflix because of Narcos, you know where I'm going. You're likely going to need some drugs to get through what just happened. Netflix stock has crashed. And oh my goodness, if we thought the crash from like 500 to 385 was bad, this is bad. Let's go into it right now just to show you what it looks like before we get into some analysis. There it is, right there. I was I was at work yesterday. I was looking at it. It was at 348. I just looked at my phone. I kind of forgot earnings were even coming out because I was just occupied with some other stuff. And I just saw it go right here to 270. And then it goes down to 250 and lower. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what did they report? What could they have possibly reported to justify this type of a crash? And then I realized, wait a second, we knew this was coming. Now, look, I don't want to be the type of person that craps on people when their stock is down, especially if you have a certain shareholder base, because to be honest, like, it could happen to me. It could happen to anybody with any stock. I don't care what stock you have. I don't care if it's Tesla, whatever. Like, one bad quarter could happen even when the company is growing, and it could crash. And, you know, Palantir's earnings are coming up on May 9th. It might not be the best earnings. Palantir might go down, who knows, to $5, $7 if they have a horrible earnings. Like, it could be pretty bad. However, I do think stocks have to be funny. I do think, you know, it has to be a fun community at times, and you have to be able to laugh at yourself. And what has happened with Netflix, to be honest, is it's just a little laughable to see what's going on, especially given the fact that this earnings call kind of highlighted some of the key arguments that most people have been saying for why Netflix is likely not going to thrive and why it's on the end of its growth curve. Now, I want to make something very clear. I have never been a fan of Netflix. In fact, I made a video a long time ago. If YouTube was a stock, it would destroy Netflix. It barely got any views. That was right when I was starting YouTube. I spent 26 minutes making that video. 26 minutes of coming up with art for that. I spent like a couple hours researching, really trying to make that argument. And then I realized no one really cared about my arguments about new YouTube and Netflix. But nonetheless, I've been very consistent on this. That's why I have not bought Netflix stock. I've talked to Joseph Carlson, which is one of the biggest Netflix bulls on my channel, and he had some good arguments that like convinced me to not be a total bear against Netflix. Obviously, I wouldn't short the stock because I think that's too risky. But I was never going to buy the stock. I just couldn't justify buying the stock. And there was a simple thesis that broke my argument for Netflix. And if anything, you get anything from this video, and we'll get into the shareholder letter they put out in a second. But if you have a thesis for a stock, like, and intuitively you believe in that thesis with your heart, with your soul, you likely should follow that thesis, whether it's buying or selling, because at least you'll be able to sleep well at night knowing, well, this was my thesis. And if my thesis was wrong, my thesis was wrong. But if my thesis was right, I'm either going to make money on the upside or I'm going to lose, or I'm not going to lose money on the downside because there's likely not going to be that downside, right? And if I do lose money at that point, then it's like, all right, I can sleep well at night because, you know, at least I believed in something in the first place. YouTube was always my thesis breaker for Netflix, not YouTube, the platform in and of itself. There are many different streaming platforms that exist. The thesis on YouTube was user-generated content is always going to be more entertaining, informative, interesting, and algorithmically targeted than anything on Netflix. It is just that simple. Like, I just never understood why people like thought Netflix was some powerhouse or some tech company. I never got it. And that's partially because of two things. Number one, my experience with Netflix, I would go to the platform and I would be like, all right, give me something to watch. And I would literally spend 30 minutes. I would waste 30 minutes trying to find a piece of content. And I'm like, this is not normal. This is not normal. Not for a tech company, because you go on Facebook, within 10 seconds, you're interested in like what your grandma is saying. You go on Twitter, within 10 seconds, you're interested in what someone you're following says. You go on TikTok, 3 seconds, you're interested in what's happening, right? You go on LinkedIn, you find some person who's like bragging about some internship. At least that's interesting. In terms of content that generates something that facilitates a level of exchange of your attention with the piece of content that is showing up on your screen, technology platforms, keyword technology, usually have a two-sided marketplace. There's creators and there's consumers. There's user-generated content, and then there's people consuming that content. That has always been more of a relationship to me that I cared about. That has always been more fascinating to me than some premium, like storytelling company that buys a bunch of assets and shows them. Like, it was never interesting. I was like, why are people obsessed with Netflix? Like, what? Stranger Things, The Office, and Friends, and they don't even own those shows. They have to license those shows. I mean, that created top of the funnel brand awareness for them for years. Imagine if NBC didn't allow them to license those shows. So to me, user-generated content and the ability to find new people, discover new creators. I mean, someone like Casey Neistat, I don't know if you guys are fans of him, but he's like one of the OG kings of YouTube. I mean, the guy put out a daily vlog for like 900 days, and he would just take his camera around New York City and show how beautiful it is to live in New York City. Stuff like that. Those are the people I like finding. The fact that 11,000 people found me, a random guy who's just talking about stocks and finance in his room, and people find that entertaining, that's amazing to me. The creator economy is everything. It gives creators like myself purpose in life. It gives us a potential chance to earn revenue and like build a livelihood for ourselves. And it gives people across the world the opportunity to discover other people that are just like them. I'm no different than a lot of other people. I'm just the guy talking into a microphone. And YouTube, TikTok, Insta, these platforms that are demonized today. And for some reason, there are some reasons you could demonize them, but there are a lot of reasons you probably shouldn't, because they actually do facilitate a lot of opportunity for people. These platforms are what I was always bullish on. Which is why I was always going to buy like Facebook over Netflix, which I did. I bought Facebook over Netflix because I just see it as a two-sided marketplace that actually facilitates the supply and demand of attention that is meaningful. Netflix to me was always, let's spend billions of dollars on premium content and let's hope people pay a subscription for it. And then you start to realize, wait a second. Like, what's the value of people paying a subscription for this if their favorite show is on HBO Max? Are they going to keep both? And then you get into this, like, people say Netflix is a simple business. It's not that simple when you look at the complex nature of streaming and competition. User-generated content businesses are more simple to me because if you have a following on one app, you're not going to not leave that app. Pinterest, 980 million monthly active users. A lot of 40-year-old women have their whole businesses on Pinterest. They're not leaving Pinterest anytime soon because Pinterest is the bread and butter for how they create content, how they consume with the world. That is incredibly important to understand. That facilitates a platform that actually has exponential growth curves built into it. Netflix has to keep buying more content. It's to find the next Squid Game. I mean, it's humbling to understand how hard it is to succeed in the entertainment industry. And I believe on the macro, my thesis breaker was always attention is switching to user-generated content. It is inevitable. It is here. It has happened. Which means premium content, the Stranger Things, all that stuff, Bridgerton. I mean, there's a world for it. It's not like that world is going away, but that world is just not that interesting right now. So let's get into some of the conversation around Netflix. Let's go to their shareholder letter real quick. Our revenue growth has slowed considerably as our results and forecasts show below. Streaming is winning over linear as we predicted, and Netflix titles are very popular. However, our relatively high household penetration, they have 220 million households, when including the large number of households sharing accounts combined with no competition, is creating revenue growth headwinds. They were supposed to add like 2.75 million subs. They lost 200,000 subs. So there was a huge swing. Now, the Russia situation contributed to about 700,000 subs of them losing, and that they kind of had to do that because they were pulling out of Russia. But that's not the whole big reason. I mean, they're talking about competition for viewing with linear TV, as well as YouTube, Amazon, and Hulu has been robust for the last 15 years. Over the last 3 years, more entertainment companies realize streaming is the future. Many new streaming services launched. This is like your Peacocks of the world, your CNN Pluses of the world, all these companies that want to launch streaming services. Then they said the pace of growth into our underlying addressable market is partly dependent on factors we don't control, like the uptake of connected TVs, the adoption of on-demand entertainment, and data costs. We believe these factors will keep improving over time so that broadband households will be potential Netflix customers, meaning they believe that eventually people are going to cut the cord on their cable boxes. I think there's about 80 million households in the United States that still could do that, or just like, I believe it's the United States or worldwide. There's a lot of households. There's in the hundreds of millions that they could potentially go after. The question is Netflix going to be winner of those households, or is another company, right? That's the big question. Now they also have this argument about, we estimate that Netflix is being shared with over 100 million additional households. Look, it's really funny because in 2015, 2016, there are tweets of Netflix saying, hey, share your password with other people. And I said this a while ago, which is that they could have solved this sharing your password problem years ago. It's a very simple. You don't think they can get an engineer and just be like, hey, make it illegal or make it really hard for someone to share their password by writing up some secret code? It doesn't have to be that secret. I mean, it's not that hard of you try to share the password, it doesn't work. The engineers have created code that stops it from sharing the password because they do geospatial data, geolocal targeting, and they recognize, hey, this password is near this person, they should be paying for it. Boom. They encourage people to share their passwords because that was how they acquired customers. When you penetrate a market and you have someone who's been, using a Netflix platform for the past 3 years, maybe they convert into a customer. Maybe you lost money on them for 3 years, but because they loved you for 3 years, they're going to pay for you for the next 10 years because they were using you for 3 years for free, and now they finally wanted to subscribe to the service. That was always the goal with Netflix. That's why they never cracked down on passwords. Now they realize, wait a second, inflation is going up. People have tight money books, tight pocketbooks. People are not willing to spend that much on streaming. People are definitely going to cheat the service at this point, right? Because you got to do what you got to do when times are rough. So that's why it's actually a effect on her business. So this was their 3 reasons. Their pace of growth is a little bit harder, given just a lot of the factors that they talked about for underlying market conditions around streaming TV. Second is their growth curve in the context of people that are sharing passwords, which they have to crack down on, and they can hopefully convert those people into customers. And third is competition, which makes sense. Now, the other problem is they are expecting to lose another 2 million subs, which is a little bit wild, right? So right here, for Q2 2022, we forecast paid net additions of negative 2 million. Last year, they incurred they would get 1.5 million new subs. Now they're saying they're going to lose 2 million subs. I mean, man. And again, if you own this stock, this is not a video to make you feel bad. This is not a video to be like, haha, why'd you buy the stock? It's more so a question of just this is what happens in the market. This is it's the harsh reality of it. And it could happen to anybody. I mean, yes, there are some things you could understand before it happens to have a better understanding of why you would buy the stock or not. I mean, I bought Facebook at 325 before earnings, so I'm not immune to maybe I should have recognized, wait a second, TikTok is eating Facebook's lunch. Analysts are not going to like the decline in user growth, blah, blah, blah. So my argument here is not to say I'm holier than thou. My argument is just to analyze what's happening. And this is one of the stocks in my short investing career that I've been right on, which is I do not see why people think it's a tech company. I do not see why analysts think it's going to grow, especially because it already has to. As soon as I knew they had 200 million households, I was like, so what's the, YouTube and they can, Facebook's at a huge scale, but their TAM is unlimited. I mean, literally everyone will get a phone. There's still 4 billion people that have to come online. And you know what they're going to want to do? They're going to want to post photos and videos and tweets. Those platforms can keep growing. When you look at something like Netflix, $16 a month, it's a lot of money for Stranger Things that I barely have time to watch, especially if you're a busy person because you don't have time to binge stuff. YouTube, you can watch a 5-minute video. It's a different relationship with the world, and I think user-generated content is just better. I also, one of my final points is that I don't ever think Netflix had an algorithm because they can never personalize anything to you because there's no click-through rate data, there's no search data, there's no algorithmic recommendation data in terms of you watch this, so you're going to like this. You may think all of that exists on Netflix, but it only exists in the repository of content that they have or that they're hoarding and that they've been hoarding for years. YouTube has new stuff coming every second. That's all keyword search targeted because of the stuff that you're searching on Google or on YouTube, which means the recommendation algorithm just becomes fundamentally stronger at the end of the day, which means your attention exists on the platform for a lot more time, and user-generated content, to me, is just more interesting. So that's my thesis on Netflix. I'm going to have some more videos coming out on it because it's a very, very interesting story. But let me know what you guys think. How did you feel about Netflix stock? Do you own Netflix stock? And where do you think this ultimately goes? Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.